Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iPhone 12 has been out for about a month. It released alongside the iPhone 12 Pro, and I've been using it on and off. I used it for an entire week, and also my daughter's been using it full time, and so I wanted to share her battery life with you as well, since I've been using the 12 Pro Max as well. So let's talk about how it's held up over that time, and also how it's actually working and if you should still pick one up. So the first thing is, this phone, I still love the design, and I think for most people the 6.1-inch display with this design is the perfect size in general. I think the display being 6.1 inches, if you're coming from something like an iPhone 7 Plus, it's a little bit bigger, so you'll have a nicer display but a smaller body, so it's easier to hold on to. The squared edges are something I really like, and I really like that they made them matte on the iPhone 12. I wish they would have done the same with the 12 Pro series. I think it just looks better and it doesn't show fingerprints, so that's something that's an advantage. It's aluminum, so it feels nice and light, and I haven't dropped it or anything, so it's held up well, of course, and it's only been a month, and most of the time it's in a case. I do carry this with me everywhere, and I've used the camera quite a bit too. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But overall, it's held up really well. Like I said, no dings or anything on the outside edge. It's held up well there, and the display is held up generally well. The first week I had it, there's a small scratch right there. You can see by my fingernail here, there's a small scratch. That's the only scratch. I'm not even sure where it came from, and for some reason it's there. It's not on any of my other phones that I've been using the same amount of time. So I don't know if something dinged it. Maybe it hit one of the cameras of the iPhone 12 Pros or something like that. The sapphire display will cause that to scratch. So you never want to touch the sapphire lenses, rather, to the display. It will scratch them right away. But so far, it's holding up really well. Now, as far as usability, well, this is fantastic. Like I said, it fits in my hands perfectly. It may be a little bit large for some, but if you're coming from, say, an older design, such as the iPhone XR or the iPhone 11, like I have here, it's actually going to feel a little bit smaller and a little more secure in your hands because the corner's not rounded. So you can see here, if I put these side by side, it's definitely smaller. So if you're coming from an 11 or a XR, for example, it's a little bit smaller and it's a little bit shorter, but the screen is the same size. And the other upgrade you get, which is either an upgrade for some or not others, depending on if PWM bothers your eyes or the flickering of the display to control brightness, this is an OLED display. And this year, Apple is not compromised between any of the phones. This is the same OLED display with a similar pixel density as all the others. So if you get a 12 Pro or a 12, you're getting the same display, but this one will only go to 625 nits of brightness. So Apple has sort of limited it for that because if you watch HDR, they go to the same brightness. So with HDR, you get 1200 nits of brightness. I'm not exactly sure if there's a hardware limitation there or not, because this actually has a couple small differences, but I think it's more that it's fine in sunlight for most people, unless you need something super bright. The brightness is fine for most people in sunlight. It's not an issue, so I don't know that that's really a consideration for many. Now, this phone feels plenty fast. It's got the A14 Bionic CPU, but with 4 gigs of RAM instead of 6 gigs of RAM like the Pro. But still, you never see any slowdowns. I never have any issues with RAM management. Everything seems to open quickly. And if I go through different apps, you can go back and forth, no problem, go into the camera. It loads quickly. And the camera is one of those things that I really like on this phone. You're not getting a compromise between this camera and the 12 Pro other than the frame rate. So you can record in Dolby Vision HDR up to 30 frames per second, but you can use 4K 60 anyway, either way. So if you go into the camera settings, this camera, like I said, is great. I've used it for many videos, and my 12 Pro 1 month later video was recorded with a 12 Pro. It's the same camera, but you get one less lens, you get 4K 60, like I said, and HDR up to 30 frames per second instead of 60. That may be one of the limitations with the RAM, but other than that, you get the same experience. So you will pay a little bit less for this phone than you will with the 12 Pro. And of course, like I said, you have this edge, and it makes it feel much lighter. So it's great that way. I don't have any issues as far as its weight. It feels nice and light compared to the others, and it's very similar to the iPhone 11 as far as weight. Maybe a little bit lighter, although I'd have to look up the specs and tell you exactly. But as far as battery life, I know a lot of people want to know that. If I go to photos here, we'll go to battery life, and this is actually my daughter's battery life, playing some games. 3 hours and 40 minutes of screen on time. And at that point, she used about 65 to 70% of the battery, probably around 70% of the battery in 3 hours and 40 minutes. I find that most people are getting about 6 hours of screen on time. You can also see that there's 8 hours and 17 minutes of screen off time playing music, for example, or YouTube audio. Now there's another screenshot here as well, where one day it was less, so 2 hours and 17 minutes with almost 50% of battery usage. But again, 27% of that was Minecraft, using a lot of power. If you're not playing games, you probably can get up to 7 hours of screen on time with this phone, depending on what you're doing. If you're just using Safari, for example, or listening to music, or occasionally watching a video and making phone calls. And speaking of phone calls, that's one of the best things with the iPhone 12 series of phones. They're now using Qualcomm 5G modems. Now in the United States, wrong side here. In the United States, we have the millimeter wave antenna, and that's not everywhere around the world because millimeter wave is not really a standard yet or available around the world. In fact, in the United States, it's only available on 2 carriers and mostly just one, Verizon. But T-Mobile, for example, doesn't have it, so it doesn't really matter that much. It's not that significant. And in fact, it doesn't matter to me at all if it has it. But one of the advantages you get is faster speeds with sub-6 5G and other 5G frequencies you might have, as well as better connectivity. When you're making a phone call, I've had 0 phone call drops. In fact, I asked my wife and daughter that are both using iPhone 12 series phones, and they said the same thing. They haven't noticed a single phone call drop, where we would have with the Intel modems that were in the previous generation. So that makes a big difference as far as that. Call quality is clear. You have no issues there. In fact, I had my wife tell me that the calls were clear the other day, just out of nowhere, saying she noticed that with her new phone. And also, you have great speed. So if we go into something like speed test, for example, and we'll turn off Wi-Fi, you'll see here, I've got 2 bars of 5G. We'll hit go. We'll give it a second. It's going to find a server, T-Mobile, and with 2 bars of service indoor in a brick building, I'm getting about 110 to 115 megabits per second down, and it keeps going up. So that's pretty phenomenal. That's double what I get with 5G in the same area. I hit 138, and I'm getting about 15 megabits per second up. So that's actually quite good for where I'm at. The regular internet could be much slower for some, depending where you live. So you'll see the speeds are more than acceptable, and they improve the better the signal is, of course. So that's going to make a difference depending where you're at. It also makes a difference where you live, so that could be a difference as well. But other than that, the display is great. The speakers, I would say, after using the speakers on all the iPhone 12 series, I would say they're not as good as the iPhone 11. They're louder, but they're not as clear or as bassy, maybe as rich, in my opinion. That could just be a design change with the frame of the phone, maybe the way it resonates the sound throughout and then pushes the speaker out. But I do think that the top speaker is louder and you get a better stereo sound overall. So I'm not really seeing any issues with it. It's just some people that regularly listen to music through their phones may notice a difference. So it's something that I can pick up. I'm pretty particular on music. A lot of people won't notice, but some people will. Other than that, there's not much more to say. I think it's an excellent phone. Although if you're going to go for the 128 option, you may want to opt for the 12 Pro because it's not that much more expensive. So if you go with the 128 gigabyte storage option, you may want to opt for that higher end phone just because you'll get an extra camera. You get the 4K 60 HDR recording ability, an extra 2 gigs of RAM, and it's not that much more. However, if you can get an iPhone 12 in a deal where you can get a buy one, get one free or some sort of deal through your carrier with a trade-in, well, then definitely go for it. There's no reason not to. It has a phenomenal camera. And like I said, I've recorded plenty of videos with the camera and I'm thoroughly impressed with what it's capable of. The speed of the camera, the quality, and I've even used the camera for thumbnails in my videos, full video recordings, and it looks phenomenal in HDR. If you want to check those out, I'll link those in the description. But in general, the camera is incredibly impressive as long as you have the right lighting. If you don't have good light, well, it's okay then. Other than that, though, I think it's phenomenal. Pick one up if you're still looking for an iPhone and maybe you're coming from an iPhone 7 or 8 or even an 11, I think you'll be happy with it. But let me know if you picked one up in the comments below. The last thing I didn't mention is the display not being 120 hertz. For iOS, I don't think this is much of an issue. Some people are going to be frustrated by it, but most people won't really mind since iOS is smooth in general. So if that's something that bothers you, then you may want to wait till iPhone 13, where they'll probably update the display to 120 hertz ProMotion. Otherwise, it's a great phone and I highly recommend it. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.